Hey everyone, Elio here with another video. This week we are playing Afanas, but we are not like those other girls. We're not playing a bunch of cheap, one-drop, broken spindle harvesters. No, we are playing Snow Queen. Let it snow, let it snow. We're not even playing Small Step, Giant Leap. We're playing 7 drops. Playing 7 drops, come on. I don't know why I'm like this. Please subscribe. And ultimately, I think we got a sweet deck. This is a Snow Queen deck. We are running 2 rare Snow Queen as our top end, which is an eternal threat that just keeps getting bigger with Afanas. Opposing reserves are locked down and they have trouble coming back. We are also running a Sakurabaru, a rather odd card in Afanas, but sometimes we need to send back an opposing lane once we have stabilized to push them out of small step giant leap territory. Plus, we are running multiple exchange cards. Exchanging a card in our reserve with Sakurabaru can let us get good early value by using Sakurabaru's support ability to draw a card. At its heart though, this is a Withered Tree deck. This is one of the best cards, I think, of the new set. The value it gives is incredible, the moths it creates are perpetual targets for Afanas ability, and it's often a must-remove target for your opponent. So, we have a lot of cards to make sure that we can not just trigger Tree, but also so that we can lock things down in quick succession with Snow Queen the turn you cast her. Pamela and Rhymefrost are great cards to combo with Snow Queen on that turn. And Freeze shows off 2 sides of the exhaust game, triggering Tree with the opposing characters, but also highlights that the cooldown effect also triggers the Withered Tree, making a Moth when played from hand, even if your opponent's unit is fleeting. Finishing off exhaust triggers, we have both variants of Moth to Flame, as well as Chrysalis. We are, ultimately, a defensive deck that is looking to win later on, so having a unit that makes 4/4/4 of power for 2 mana on its own and has an exhaust support ability is awesome, and we don't care about the defender. Once we move out of our exhaust cards, we get to our general support units. Baba Yagas and Mir auto-include in any Ysmir list, and the others serve as serviceable 1-drops that fill curves, stall, and act as Afanas targets. Similarly, our spells get filled out with some staples. Off you go for removal, Banishing Gate, which is necessary for dealing cards like Grand Endeavor or Lyra Festival, and Magical Training is a premier exchange target that also digs deeper into the deck. Finally, our uniques, all cheap characters for Afanas, but the Muna caregivers can anchor a boosted Moth. That's the deck. Let's jump into some games. Okay, we're up against a Gulrang. So starting out, I kind of want to keep a gate because there's a lot of problematic permanents from Gulrang that can get a lot of advantage. Anything that makes tokens is just powerful in Gulrang. Moth to Flame feels worse versus them, where these tokens are just easily matched. And Pamela, I kind of do like, should be able to advance turn 1 against just a token like a mobile defender. And then it's either like Nyala Freeze. I'll keep the Freeze over a Nyala, so kind of going with a little bit of removal to start. I don't like having to play Nyala without targets, and I don't know when I'm going to have those targets available to me. So, not a super thrilling hand, but we'll keep a Gate, Freeze, and a Pamela, and plan to Pamela turn 1. Pamela! Opponent opens with field reinforcements. We'll open with the Pamela on the opposite lane, so that if he does play a rare mobile defender, he doesn't block us and advance. He plays a unique Foundry Engineer that could actually be followed up with a mobile defender. But otherwise, we'll trade lanes with us. Okay, here I'll put back the Moth Larva. I end up putting this back a lot, I find, but it's still worth it because sometimes I just need a 1-drop. And to avoid any Order Spy, we'll open up with Pamela. It does at least make distance here, so well, it pushes further on right, so it's better to push it on the right. It does at least make distance here, so it's not horrible, but I'd rather have it contributing as much power as it can, especially while he's in his defender round. There's no need to try to play defensive against the water. And then we'll play the Chrysalis on the left. Both of us having defender, but we'll start with a token next turn. Okay, we don't need 2 Banishing Gates, so we'll put back one of the gates. While he hasn't played any landmarks, I don't want to be stuck with a hand that counters something that he may not even end up doing. He opens with Moth, and we can go ahead and play the Tree on the right, exhausting his play that may follow that up, and also building up on the left with enough power to maybe be advancing. But no, there's that rare mobile armory, which allows defender units to move forward and puts 2 power on there, so he'll actually be able to advance on left instead of us. Which is a cool new thing out of Gulrang, this ability to really push with defender units. Okay, I still do want to keep one gate. I kind of want to... I want to keep the Snow Queen. I don't know, like a lot of Gulrangs don't necessarily run that many sticky notes, and in general, I feel like while he's going slow, having my inevitable endgame here will be important. And I'll keep my other 7-drop for now because we're almost there. I should probably keep the freeze because it turns on the Nilam by exhausting itself, exhausting the characters that it sends to reserve. But you know, I'm still worried about like the 5-drop rare Ortis carrier. So for now, I'm keeping the gate and I'm putting back the freeze. And I'll take a slow turn here, starting with the Chrysalis on the left side, trying to stop him from getting an easy advance with the Foundry Engineer. And then we just pass. Okay, I'd rather have the Snow Queens than the Sokka. Usually Gulrang isn't playing Grand Endeavor, and I also have Banishing Gate as an answer to Grand Endeavor, and so like there's not like a lot of surprise things that he's gonna be able to do. He's not gonna push ahead super fast, so the Sokka to stabilize a little bit doesn't seem as necessary. And we also don't have any swap cards right now to put that into the reserve and draw a card. We'll see what he does. We'll probably open up with a Mage Training though to draw. He just plays a rare Haven Trainee. Drawing Rhyme Frost here is nice. We haven't been able to turn on our tree in a bit. Now, we could Rhyme Frost our own magical training to make a Moth here, and then use the gate to get rid of the Valamon. But we actually missed this line and just used the gate on the Valamon. So we basically could have stopped in advance and advanced ourselves, but we missed out on that. It's important to realize that this frost can sometimes be used on your own things in a pinch. Once I've already cast the gate and I see this line where I can make a 2/2/2, it's not as worth it for me just to advance when I'm not blocking him. I'd rather keep cheaper Rhyme Frost around on my turn. Now, I've drawn something that can continually trigger the Nalam. I probably should have put the Sleight of Hand back, because Rhyme Frost also exhausts things and is nice with the Snow Queen for helping us force things into their reserve to stay exhausted. But we want to draw, we also are looking for some removal, and the line we took is thinking more about how can we get to Off You Goes to potentially answer some of the things that he's putting on the board, especially since both of our freezes are now gone. We just need to slow him down a little bit. And so our hope is to chain magical trainings with Sleight of Hand and maybe also cast Snow Queen 2 turns in a row. So we'll put back the Rhyme Frost with that in mind, which also wouldn't have had a target this turn anyway. And it lets us open up with a Snow Queen on this Haven Trainee, make a Moth in the other lane, and they get 1 play this turn. It's also nice playing against Gulrang and not getting behind so that they have a stuck Icebound Lake. They play Open the Gates here, and we can just use a magical training or a Sleight to tie here. And we'll open up with the Sleight, swapping the Queen. The Queen is eternal, so it does make it a Sticky Notes permanent, but it's a more even trade or beneficial trade for us to swap those. There's an Off You Go we were looking for. We can go ahead and put back one of the magical trainings. Probably do a Snow Queen plus Off You Go this turn. Opponent goes all left with these Open the Gates, so we don't really have a way to match that, especially not one that's going to be resilient to whatever's in his hand. So we can use this turn to develop the Snow Queen, but we'll first magical training to see what's available to us. But we're letting them get 1 turn closer. And then finally we'll continue to build up our Snow Queens here going into the next round. So while they are only 1 point away, we are now having a lot of power sticking on the board. This Icebound Lake is also totally dead. We can put back Chrysalis, has Defender, which, I mean, is fine at this point. We're just trying to survive. But we'll open again with a stall play in the Magical Training, balance out our two Snow Queens. Okay, that's a Sticky Notes. That is probably going to hit our Fleeting one, so we are punished for putting that in the reserve a little bit. I don't know how much we could afford to play another 7 mana for Snow Queen this turn either way. Bull Stall, again, play our cheapest thing in the Moonic Caregiver on the left. They do play Jeanne d'Arc, and we'll actually swap the Off You Go for the Magical Training. We have a lot of mana now, so if we do, the mana difference here is the same, but he's not actually playing cheap things that Off You Go is making good trades against, and we want to just dig deeper into our deck. Now, we're going to advance on the right here, and we're currently going to advance on the left. But he's making a ton of power this turn. So rather than advance on the left this turn, we do choose to play out the Chrysalis, which will give us Defender, but will start us with more power next turn so that it's harder for the opponent to push through and get a lethal win. Again, we're trying really hard to survive right now, and I'd rather take one more turn to win than to give him a 2-power advantage this turn. We can get rid of the Off You Go here. Pushing more for power. We'll get rid of one of the Baba Yagas. These other things are going to provide more power for their mana cost. But we're mostly just trying to survive on the left here, which, if we hadn't made this Defender, we'd currently be down 6 power. The other thing that we have available to us this turn is the Moonic Caregiver to anchor a Mana Moth. So we probably can't afford at this point to play around something like a Teamwork Training. But we'll open up with our stall play, draw a card, get power on the Moth where we're currently losing. They play Armory, now they're at 8 power. Now we can go ahead and Moth now, which will make 2 more Moths on the left. We could pump something which, if they have Teamwork Training, it would go on this. Would leave us with 4 power on board, 6, 8. We would have enough to block them. So because of that, we can continue to stack on the Mana Moth with our counters and plan to anchor it. So once again, next turn we have lots of power in play. Now, it's not a Teamwork Training, it's a big thing, but we do have enough stuff here with this drawn Off You Go, especially, to be able to turn them off. But once again, because they'll be starting with this Jeanne d'Arc, rather than try to advance this turn, we'll play a Defender unit out to be able to start next turn with more power, and next turn, if we double advance, we win the game. So even though they're starting with 4 on each side, we are starting with 5, 7 with the extra token from the Defender unit, putting us into a really good position. Moth is an easy keep, but then the Magical Training is going to give us a counter, plus, again, dig us to potentially something. We don't need a mana here. We can do 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, we can do 4, 5, 6, 7, swap these two, 8, 9, 10, and we have 1 mana left over, maybe if we draw a Rime Frost or something. But we'll open up with Tree on his Valemon. That means he only has 2 cards with which to beat us. Now, the Sleight of Hand is going to exhaust, so we don't need to make both of our Moths right now. If he uses a turn Sleight of Handing, or Sticky Notesing, then we definitely win. So we'll make 1 Moth here on the right side to balance out our power, but we'll save the other Moth to respond to wherever he puts power, and not putting our power on the board quicker than we need to be doing. This is where you swap the MT for the Moth. Their first play is a Paper Herald, and they have 1 play left, which we'll find out if it's some crazy unique that's going to end the game for us. Sunisa is not going to be enough. We can just pump power on the right, and we'll double advance for the win against Gulrang. Okay, up against Sigismar. Sigmar is too fast for us to be able to keep the Snow Queen in our hand, so unfortunately, this is going to mana. We'll definitely play Baba Yaga turn 1 to draw, especially with us going first. Then everything else can kind of combine to interesting turn 2s, right? Like we can do Baba plus Pamela and then keep a card for later. We can do Moth to Flame just as our turn 2 play, and then again, keep a card for later. We could do Freeze plus Moth Larva, and if he plays a character going first next turn, then we can actually freeze it, immediately Larva. It's big enough to override the token lane, though that only works if he doesn't play the card from reserve that he opens with this turn. So, which is often like what happens, uh, especially against Sigismar. People are afraid of sabotage. If I felt more confident that for some reason he'd be playing a card that freeze would get exhaust value out of, I would like the freeze plus moth larva. But instead, we're just going to keep our more powerful cards on their surface and do Baba, Moth to Flame for the turn 2, and then the best card to, I think, keep for future outside of that is Freeze. Putting back the Larva, the Pamela, and the Snow Queen. We'll open with Baba. We want to do this in the lane that has the token in it, so it's more difficult for him to double advance. In general, we're going to be playing defensively, meaning we're trying to block lanes rather than trying to push advances when we have the option between the two. We do draw Moth to Flame here. Now, I want to keep the Moz, I want to keep the Baba. Freeze is something we could consider putting back, against Sigismar a lot of times. Sometimes maybe it doesn't have good targets. For now, we'll put back we put back the Nyala, and I think in hindsight, the Nyala can swap Babas for like a Moth to Flame, which is better from the reserve anyway, and we have an abundance of Moth to Flames. And so maybe putting back the Freeze would have been a better move there. Especially, like Off You Go is better in this matchup a lot of the time. But we did what we did, and now we'll just do our big Moth, which with the boost on the right side will have us leading both sides, and hopefully he doesn't at least double advance here. But this Rare Paper Herald is perfect for double advancing on right, or advancing on right and blocking us, and the Ortis Trooper does the same on the left. So dropping out these rare one drops, which again shows that he's going to be low to the ground and aggressive, which this next turn, not going to want to keep the freeze knowing that, especially drawing the Off You Go. We don't need both, right? So that's the move that I think that you should do, is put back this freeze at this point. We do put back the baby Moth, just because it's not competing against power here, but I think having the cheap thing would have maybe been a little bit better. But we can open up with Moth to Flame on both sides, and then we have our 2-mana play to either follow up with Baba Yaga or Off You Go, depending on what is seen from the opponent. Now, the other argument for keeping freeze and in general keeping removal is just when they're lower to the ground, they tend to run out of cards a little quicker. And so when you're trading cards that like immediately trade for them, like maybe that's going to put them at a resource disadvantage. But still, I think it's probably better to keep the actual cheaper interaction around, or cheaper plays around. They play an Ortis Attorney, which is interesting with this lower curve. Like a lot of times they're looking to push lanes, and that doesn't necessarily take advantage from that. But this time we will put back the freeze. We don't have room for a 3-mana trade for a lot of these things. This is like the best target for the Ortis Attorney, and really if he plays Ortis Attorney, like we're kind of happy with it. We'll play Chrysalis. Can play it on either side, maybe slightly better on the right since he's currently at 2 there. But we're also planning on casting some spells this turn, so this is more likely going to be at least 3 power. Like what we'd really like to do here is like Baba plus Magical Training, or Moth plus Magical Training. But we'll open with the Baba, which will be advancing on the right and blocking. Draw a tree, which is Nice. And then they finish off with Ortis Attorney. So we once again can block just one thing here, which we will Magical Training to block on the left. Draw our second tree. They get a single advance. Kind of scary territory. Grand Endeavor is now at a place where it would need a must answer if they play it this turn. Get rid of the Magical Training. We can't afford to play 3 mana right now. At least, though, we're starting with this Mana Moth in play. And that's actually a reason for us to have played the Chrysalis on the left, which is that we know he's getting the Sigismar token on the left. So while it was the bigger power at the time was on the right, we have the boost to hand out, and this is going to be better in the future. We don't need 3 trees, so we'll put back a tree. And we can go ahead and open with a tree, making it a token on the opposite side. They play Keylon Burst, immediately getting rid of our tree, which is awkward. We just manaed one of ours, so this is our last tree in hand. And we have a handful of options here. I don't want to overflow my reserve, so I'm just going to play the Baba on the left, which is the downside of that is that it's slightly less mana efficient, meaning that on future turns, we don't have that 2-drop available to us. And they ended up spying us anyway, so you can't tell the future, but we did get bit by that a little bit, and we'll see how much that mana comes back to bite us. At least we do get the blocks there, though, and we get an advance. We're now in the territory now, again, where if they play an Endeavor this turn, it's okay. We can double advance twice in a row and still win. So with that in mind, this isn't a we need to gate Endeavor turn. So we can put back this gate that we just drew. And we'll see what they open up with, but we'll tree the remaining thing, which looks like it's going to be this Ortis Spy. They play a unique Fire Rabbit, which does a lot of things. At dusk, it can gain fleeting to discard a permanent, so that's going to be our last tree. That's pretty brutal. When another non-token character joins any of the expeditions, they controls landmarks. He doesn't, but he'd make soldiers, and then he'd also get things if he controls landmarks when he plays it. I don't want this to go away, so I'm going to off you go it in hopes of protecting. Now, I think that there is a good argument for first Rime Frosting, targeting nothing just to boost this and to stall. But the way that I read this was that this would discard permanents only if it didn't already have fleeting. But I don't think that's actually true. I think that you can just trigger this and it discards the permanents. At least that's the way that a Board Game Arena plays it. So we'll maybe find out in the future if this is a bug or not. But we off you go this. He immediately plays it again, and we think maybe our tree is safe. But in reality, he has the Foundry Mechanic follow-up, which would have allowed him to do all these plays anyway. And he does block us while getting rid of our tree. So now we're 1 away. We're in scary Endeavor territory again. And we're definitely on the back foot. Here, we need to get rid of one of the more expensive things, which unfortunately right now in hand is Moth. And we just have to try to get advances this round and make it to the next. So open up with our slower plays that actually have impact. There's not a preferred exhaust target here, so no need to open up with a Rime Frost, even though once they play something here, we'll probably Rime Frost the remaining thing. But this also allows us to play a character first, so any spell we play gets boost from Afanas. So Wounded Caregiver on the left. They open up with Ortis Spy. We can Rime Frost, as said, getting the boost, reducing their plays. They're currently ahead by 1 on the left, but they use that to get rid of our Wounded Caregiver. We're generally fine with that. This actually allows us to now Moth to Flame on the left. We can start pumping it, and we can maybe even give it anchored with the Wounded Caregiver. They pass, which is a little awkward. Would have loved to like off you go whatever character they play, but we'll play this off you go anyway because we're going to discard to reserve, and then we'll follow that up with the support on the mana moss. So not only do we advance this turn, but we also start next turn with a 4/4/4 in play on the slot that he gets tokens. We're still in Endeavor scary territory, and we don't draw a Vanishing Gate, so we just have to hope that we dodge whatever they have. Here we can do off, moth, and then 2 Rime Frost, so we won't mana anything this turn. We'll just see what they open up with. Luckily, it's not a spy. That would have been one of the more awkward things, because us being able to make this moth on the right now gives us at least characters on both sides to fight against what they're doing. We'll go ahead and off you go something now, building up power on the right. So hitting the Baba Yaga. They played again on the left. Now we do off you go this Baba here, building up power. I think that it's worth noting that that was extremely risky. If they drew into teamwork training or tiny gel actually doesn't hit us, so just teamwork training, then they can win here. And it was probably better to open up with a Rime Frost, just like targeting the other Rime Frost, just to see whether or not we needed to be careful. Or we needed to save the off you go for a character in a lane that was not protected. But really, in order for that to happen, like they would need to teamwork training just the thing on the right, because if they teamwork training this moth, we're dead anyway because he has 2 characters and we can't stop that. So ultimately the play ended up fine. We can just pass here, double advance, and go into the final round tied up. We do have no characters though, but luckily draw into Student and Chrysalis. We'll keep everything here, and we're just going to fight for our lives. Opening up with the Chrysalis as our character is the best thing here, since even if they remove it, at least we get a body. Now, most of the removal that realistically is going to be played out of here is going to just send to reserve, though they are doing some already surprising inclusions that I haven't seen a lot of, like this Keel Umber, so maybe they're the gate. But if they play gate on Studious Disciple, we'll take the loss. So we'll open up with the Studious Disciple on the right. That way, any future spell plays, we can pump whichever side seems to need it the most. And now, he's just played small things so far, so we'll start with like a stall play of this Frost from the reserve. This will let us tie on the left, and we'll also both hide what's in our hand and buy us time to see what we need to off you go. It also had the bonus of actually protecting against this spy, though this is a more surprising thing. Like normally if someone has a sabotage play, they're gonna open up with it. Now here, rather than immediately off you going, we want to save this for the last moment. For example, maybe off you going this thing, something on the right to be able to push this lane. So we'll do an empty Rice Frost, pushing the right lane and saving the off you go in case this can, or at least send us into the tiebreaker by removing the character on the right. The charge, in fact, is going to make this left lane completely unblockable, but the off you go will be enough to win the right, and we go to the tiebreaker round. It's a good position to be in. We start with a 2/2/2. Both of us are discarding a card from our reserve. We'll keep the Chrysalis and actually the off you go. We have plenty of mana. The defender does not matter in tiebreaker, so this is just a 2/2/2 for 2, which is a little bit better than the Studious Disciple value. And all the Rime Frost is definitely like good against someone that has reserve and it doesn't have a lot of options here. But I think that the way that I really get beaten is by a bigger 3-drop play like the Commander or even like a Baba Yaga. So I'd rather just get rid of more power with off you go. They open up with Spy. We can just play our Chrysalises out, which are going to have good defender value. Actually, before playing this Chrysalis out, probably makes sense to draw, see what our options are. 1 mana play to boost the thing that has Defender. So if they remove it, we get a Moth token. They play Attorney and have 1 thing left. Now we can Niala. If we return the Mage Training, then it's basically 3/2/3 of power. But if we return the Off You Go, we can basically just cast Off You Go and not cast as Chrysalis. But the Off You Go will remove also 3/3/2 of power, or if they charge, even more. And also the Off You Go also gets a boost. So it's basically always going to be 1/1/1 more stats that this is protecting us with. So we'll Niala, swap Chrysalis for Off You Go, and there should basically be nothing left that can beat us here, and they don't have something that can even match. So the Off You Go will finish off on the Ortis Attorney, and we take the W in a very close game. All right. Afanas, Sword of the Mirror, but there is 0 chance that our opponent is running Snow Queen. They're not that cool. We are probably not to put back this Saka Robru, which is unfortunate because I do actually like it against Afanas to push them off of a small step when they get into range. Instead, I do like Freeze. Getting rid of their characters is always good versus Afanas, especially if they can't immediately replay them. Baba is always a good turn 1 play. And then I'd rather have a character to contest in the Moth than the Rhymefrost or Magical Training. So these 3 will be the keep. They open with a Mage Dancer. We could Baba, but any spell like Magical Training will make it so that they beat the Baba. So instead, we'll just do a Magical Training on left to force at least the tie. We'll put back Moth Larva there. We're going to plan on either freezing. We'll open with Baba Yaga, draw a card, and almost certainly Magical Training. Well, actually, if we do that, that overflows our reserve. So we'll do Moth instead. It's a little bit less mana efficient, but it gives us better card value. With this, we'll block the right side. The Baba in the future will be better on the left. And this is going to end up being a 4-power Moth, assuming that they don't remove anything. So hopefully they don't have Off You Go, and we at least just trade here. They do have the Off You Go, though, and they're getting at least a comeback against us to tie it up, which is what happens. But maybe they're lower on characters, and we're built for the late game, so them having 1 move and 2 turns is a great start for us. Now here, definitely want to keep the tree. Freeze is going to act as a tree trigger, so I don't think that we need this Rhyme, and I like the card draw plus Off You Go versus character heavy or character dependent Afanas. So we put back the Rhymefrost, and we'll be able to open up with a tree on the Off You Go, making our character on the right, and hopefully blocking here. So 3/3, tied up once again. Now here, want to keep the removal, and so it's either a Baba or a Studious Disciple. Normally, I'd put back the Studious Disciple, but I think there's a real possibility that my play here is Baba, Off You Go, Disciple. And similarly, like next turn, we may like Disciple, Magical Training, Freeze. The Disciple just plays better into our curve for things that we want to do right now. So we'll put back one of the Babas, which honestly may be a mistake, but we'll go for the better curve fitting. Put the Baba on the left to draw a card, and they play Baba on the right. Now here is where I do think that we make a mistake. If we're keeping this Disciple, it's probably best for us to play Disciple right, and then threaten Off You Go with whatever they follow up with. But instead, we freeze this to make the Moth, which is going to overflow our reserve, which we'll have to discard this Magical Training, and just doesn't feel as effective here. If we had done the Disciple, we would have also been able to nab this Shroom with the Off You Go during its anchored effect, which is always a solid feeling. So we trade lanes, we discard from our reserve. But things are still fine. You can't play perfect. It's a hard game, a lot of options. Here, I'll get rid of the common Chrysalis. It's either that or the Disciple. They refill their hand, and this is actually a great spot for the freeze where we can get the exhaust with the Nyala. We'll make that on the right side since the Studious Disciple plays better to the left in this Mountain Water. They play an Alchemist, which we can actually Studious Disciple, Off You Go, and take 2 lanes here. Now, once again, we'll be discarding from our reserve. We'll see what they keep first. If they keep 2 characters, we'll probably keep this Off You Go, but otherwise we'll get rid of the Off You Go. They do only keep 1. So we can get rid of the Off You Go. We have 1 in hand, and the Snow Queen is going to answer at least one of these Snoother Shrooms. And we did draw Moth, Larva, and Moth to Flame. We already have a 1-drop to follow up the Snow Queen with, so we can use the Disciple for that, so we can get rid of the Larva. And this Moth to Flame will be good with the tree in the future. Opening with Queen, we'll go to the lane that has a single color and freeze this Sneezer Shroom. Now, Tooth Fairy comes in, hits the Disciple. At least we did get the token from this, but it does stop our future plays, and we'll see how they finish it off. Beauty Sleep comes out, hits the Mana Moth. Now, when they cast this sleep, they probably notice that this now has Tough 1. They have 2 options here now where they can either, depending on what's in their hand, if this is not useful, they can Helping Hand, getting rid of one of their ways to keep their characters around. Or they can just Beauty Sleep again. They won't be able to hit the Snow Queen, but they'll at least be able to pump the Mage Dancer to higher power. But they Beauty Sleep purely for the boost. But we're going into potentially the final round with a lot of power on board. We'll get rid of the Larva here. We have a lot of mana-intensive plays. We'll open up with Off You Go so that he can't Helping Hand and replay this. We'll actually pump up the Snow Queen first, since this has Eternal, and if we're going to go into more rounds, I want it there. And then we'll probably be Off You Going something, but we'll open up with the big Moth, which is going to also make a tree here, and we can put that on the left side. So that'll add additional 5 power to the left side. And they've got 1 card in hand. It's probably game. Yep, small step won't be enough. Puts them 1 short, and we beat a kind of traditional Afanas build. All right, GG. Those are the games. I really love this deck. It's my favorite deck that I've played so far in the new meta. Everyone else is sleeping on the Queen, not me. Appreciate you watching, and tune in next time for some more games.